President Joe Biden's historic commutations of nearly 1,500 people's sentences drew big headlines in December 2024, but the real shock came when 2 recipients refused. Surprisingly, they're not the only ones to have ever done so. Len Davis is one of 2 death row inmates who are refusing Biden's reduction in sentencing. According to the Washington Post, Davis says that he's holding out for appeals, which is why he protested having his sentence commuted from death to life in prison.
Both men claim they're innocent and are trying to get their convictions overturned.
The facts of Davis's case stand out as particularly disturbing. He was a police officer in the Desire Projects in New Orleans in the 1990s. However, there'd been complaints of brutality against Davis going back to 1987, usually related to intimidation and violence. He was eventually sentenced to death for hiring a hitman to kill a woman named Kim Groves in retaliation for filing a brutality complaint against him. In 1996, Davis was convicted and sentenced to death for ordering Groves' murder. According to Police One, Davis protested Biden's commutation because the president was, quote, forcing an unconstitutional life sentence on him. Furthermore, in a motion filed in court, Davis wrote that he's always insisted he's innocent. The second person to refuse Biden's act of clemency was Shannon Agofsky. Back in 1989, Shannon and his brother Joe robbed a bank in Knoll, Missouri. The bank manager went missing, too, and was found floating in a river with a chain hoist duct taped to his ankle. Evidence couldn't completely connect his death to the Agofsky brothers, but the brothers were found guilty of aggravated armed bank robbery, conspiracy, and use of a firearm while committing a felony. They were sentenced to life in prison. Joe died in incarceration from unknown causes in 2013, and Shannon received a death sentence in 2004 for the 2001 murder of a fellow inmate. However, Shannon filed an injunction against Biden's attempt to commute his sentence back to life behind bars.
These 37 are never leaving prison, so he has not actually let anyone out of prison yet.
In 1909, President William Howard Taft commuted the death sentence of Vuco Perovich, who had been convicted of murder, to life in prison. In 1918, however, Perovich asked for a pardon. He was refused, tried again in 1921, and was refused again. Then, in 1925, he protested his sentence being commuted altogether. Filing a legal document meant to question whether he was being detained on lawful grounds. It's unclear whether or not Perovich preferred to go back to death row, but this may have been his intention. In 1915, President Woodrow Wilson commuted the sentence of George Burdick, an editor for the New York Tribune. In a nutshell, the case involved Burdick refusing to answer questions from a grand jury regarding crimes he might have committed related to customs fraud. Burdick cited the Fifth Amendment to avoid answering, stating that his answers might incriminate him, and President Wilson intervened and pardoned him. Burdick was apparently an extremely stubborn person and refused the pardon. He then continued refusing to answer the jury's questions. The first instance of a criminal refusing presidential clemency came in 1830, when President Andrew Jackson pardoned George Wilson. Wilson and his co-conspirator James Porter had committed a crime that might not seem like it warrants the death penalty, robbing mailmen of mail. Both men pleaded not guilty at trial, but on May 27, 1830, they were sentenced to death for robbing and assaulting mail carrier Samuel McCrae. On July 2nd, Porter was executed. Wilson, however, withdrew his plea of not guilty. As a result, President Jackson pardoned Wilson on the condition that he served 20 years for other crimes he had committed. Strangely enough, Wilson refused. It's suggested he mixed up what he was being pardoned for.